The stars stretched across the endless dark like silver dust scattered on black glass. The Air and Dominion convoy moved quietly through this lonely part of space, their ships glowing softly with blue light. Among them was the royal cruiser carrying Princess Eliara, heir of the Dominion. She sat near the wide glass wall of the observation deck, gazing out into the cold void. Her mind was full of thoughts about the fragile peace talks she was meant to attend. For her, duty always came before dreams. Suddenly, the calm shattered. Without warning, a swarm of Kieran raider ships burst out of the darkness. They were brutal pirates known for hunting weak vessels and destroying without mercy. Their jagged ships surrounded the convoy like wolves circling prey. Red beams of energy cut across the black. The escort fighters of the Dominion tried to fight back, but the raiders were too many, too fast. One by one, the shields of the Dominion ships flickered and broke apart. The alarm rang across the royal cruiser. Eliara felt the tremble of impact as the raiders' fire tore into the hull. The captain shouted commands, the crew rushed to their stations, but deep inside they all knew. The convoy was doomed. The Kirans were merciless, and no help was near in this forgotten corner of space. Eliara's guards pulled her toward the escape chamber. But even the escape pods would be useless. The raiders never spared survivors. Fear wrapped around her heart like ice. For the first time in her life, the princess felt the shadow of death drawing close. She tried to stay calm, to remain the leader her people expected, but inside she thought, this is how it ends. Then something unexpected happened. A new signal appeared on the ship's sensors. A small single vessel, not Dominion, not Raider. It was old, patched with mismatched parts. A ship that looked like it belonged more to scavengers than soldiers. Yet it rushed into the battlefield without hesitation, flying straight toward the swarm of Raider ships. "Who is that?" one of the officers shouted. No one knew. On the viewing screen, Eliara watched in disbelief as the tiny ship darted between the massive Raider cruisers. It should have been destroyed instantly, yet it twisted and rolled with impossible skill. Its weapons fired in short, clever bursts, not wasting energy. Each shot found a weak point. One Raider ship exploded, then another. The unknown pilot used tricks no computer could predict, sliding into blind spots, luring enemies into crashing into each other. The Dominion crew stared in awe. Whoever was flying that ship was not fighting with advanced technology. He was fighting with instinct, with raw courage. The raiders tried to crush him with numbers, but the small ship moved like it was alive, dodging beams by the width of a breath. Where Dominion tactics failed, the stranger succeeded. Eliara leaned forward, her fear slowly giving way to wonder. Why would anyone risk themselves for us? She whispered. Minutes passed like hours. At last the raiders broke. Their ships scattered, engines burning, unwilling to lose more to this one reckless opponent. The battlefield fell silent, broken only by the wreckage drifting slowly in the void. The convoy was saved, but before anyone could hail the mysterious savior, the small ship turned away. Its engines burned bright, carrying it back into the stars. No name, no signal, no words of victory. It simply vanished into the endless dark, leaving the survivors with only questions. Eliara pressed her hand against the glass, staring at the trail of light the ship had left behind. Her heart pounded, not from fear anymore, but from something else, curiosity, admiration, and a strange pull she could not explain. She remembered the moment when the raiders' fire had almost destroyed her ship. At that instant, a voice had come through the static of her communicator, a human voice, steady and rough, saying only, "You'll live. That's enough." Then the voice was gone. She could not forget it. The crew cheered for their survival, but Eliara remained quiet. She knew this battle was not just a rescue, it was the beginning of something greater. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of her people, was a human who had saved her without asking for reward, without waiting for thanks. A human who fought like no other being in the galaxy, and though he had vanished into the dark, she promised herself one thing: she would find him. The stars no longer looked distant to her. They looked like a trail, a path leading toward the ghost who had turned death into hope. The days after the attack were filled with both relief and confusion. The Air and Dominion convoy limped back toward safer space, their damaged ships patched as best as possible. The royal cruiser had survived, and so had Princess Eliara. To her people, this was a miracle. Yet to her, it was a mystery that would not leave her mind. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw flashes of that small, battered ship weaving between the raiders. She heard again the voice through the static. "You'll live. That's enough." Those words echoed in her memory, carrying a weight she could not ignore. The Council of the Dominion praised the bravery of their own soldiers, but when Eliara mentioned the unknown rescuer, most dismissed it. Some called it luck. Others said she had imagined the voice in the chaos. A few even claimed the strange ship might have been a rogue mercenary looking for spoils. None believed a human could be responsible. Humans were not respected in the greater galaxy. They were seen as reckless, impulsive, and too primitive to matter in the politics of empires. Their worlds were young, their fleets small, their technology less advanced compared to other great civilizations. To most alien leaders, humanity was nothing more than a noisy newcomer. But Eliara was not convinced. She had seen the impossible with her own eyes. The way that ship had flown, the way the pilot had fought, it was not luck. It was skill, determination, and courage that no machine could copy. Whoever that human was, he had saved not only her life but the entire convoy. At night, when the stars filled the sky outside her quarters, Eliara found herself wondering about him. What kind of person would throw himself into danger for strangers? What kind of man would fight without expecting anything in return? She knew her people. The Dominion was proud, honorable, but always careful. They weighed risks and rewards before acting. But this human had done something different. He had chosen to act without hesitation. Her curiosity grew stronger with each passing day. When they finally reached the heart of Dominion space, Eliara stood before the High Council to give her report. The great chamber echoed with the voices of elders, their tall figures wrapped in flowing robes of silver and blue. They listened as she described the attack, the hopeless battle, and the sudden arrival of the mysterious savior. The counselors exchanged doubtful glances. One of them, Counselor Varric, leaned forward with sharp eyes. "Princess," he said, "you claim a lone ship defeated an entire squadron of Kiran raiders. Do you expect us to believe this was anything more than chance?" "It was no chance," Eliara replied firmly. "I saw it. We all did. That pilot fought with skill beyond anything I have witnessed. He saved us when no one else could," another counselor scoffed. "A story born from fear. The Kirans fled because their ambush failed. Do not give credit to a phantom." Eliara felt frustration burn inside her, but she did not lose her calm. She lifted her chin and spoke with quiet strength. "If you doubt my word, then doubt as you wish. But I will not forget the truth. Someone was there. Someone risked everything for us, and I will find out who he is." The chamber fell silent for a moment. The elders did not argue further, but their dismissive expressions told her enough. They would not support her search. That night, Eliara stood once more at the observation deck of her cruiser. The stars stretched out endlessly before her, millions of paths waiting to be taken. She pressed her hand against the glass and whispered to herself, "Where are you?" Her advisors urged her to move on, to focus on her duties, but Eliara's heart would not let go. She began to gather what little information she could. Ship logs showed unusual energy spikes during the battle. Fragments of raider wreckage revealed patterns of fire that matched no known weapon system. The more she studied, the clearer it became. This was no phantom. Someone had been there, and that someone was human. As weeks turned to months, whispers began to spread among the crews of the convoy. They spoke quietly of a ghost ship, a human vessel that appeared in the darkest moments and vanished without thanks. Some laughed at the tale, but others believed. To Eliara, these whispers only strengthened her resolve. She kept her search hidden from most of the council, knowing they would call it foolish. But in her heart she felt certain. This human mattered. His actions had already changed her life, and she sensed they would change much more in time. One evening, as her ship prepared for another diplomatic journey, Eliara gazed at the stars once again. She remembered the human's voice, rough and steady, carrying not pride but simple resolve. "You'll live. That's enough." No alien leader had ever spoken such words to her. No one in her own people had ever acted so selflessly. That was why she could not forget him. That was why she knew she had to find him, no matter how long it took. The galaxy was vast and the trail was cold, but Eliara's determination burned brighter than fear. Somewhere out there was the human who had saved her, and when she finally saw him again, she would not let him vanish into the dark. The months passed, but the memory of that night in the stars never left Eliara. She carried her royal duties as expected: speeches, negotiations, appearances before the Dominion's citizens, but beneath the calm mask of a princess, her thoughts remained fixed on one thing: the human who had saved her. At first, her search was slow. The Dominion's records had almost nothing about humans. Their worlds were small colonies, their fleets barely recognized in galactic law. To most of the galaxy, humans were little more than stubborn wanderers with strange traditions. But Eliara had seen more. She had seen one man in a fragile ship fight like an entire fleet. She could not accept that such a being would simply vanish without trace. She spent nights reading old reports of battles where human vessels had been sighted. Many were forgotten or ignored by the Dominion Council, but Eliara studied each carefully. Patterns began to emerge: small groups of raiders destroyed unexpectedly, pirate lords complaining about reckless human pilots, survivors who told stories of a lone ship that struck fast and disappeared before anyone could ask for help. Her advisors worried about her obsession. "Princess," one of them told her, "you are chasing shadows. Even if this human exists, why does it matter? You owe him gratitude, yes, but must you chase across the stars for him?" Eliara looked out at the galaxy map glowing before her. "Because no one else would have done what he did. My people fight with honor, yes. Other species fight with precision. But this human fought with something different. If I understand what drives him, perhaps I will understand what humanity truly is." Still, the path was not easy. Many doors closed to her. Merchants claimed ignorance. Pirates lied to protect their secrets. Official records erased the very details she searched for. Yet Eliara's determination only grew stronger. Her search finally led her to the outer colonies, where civilization was thin and life was harsh. Here humans lived side by side with other wanderers, building homes on dusty moons and frozen rocks. They worked in mines, traded in rough markets, and fought to defend what little they had. Eliara moved among them in secret, her royal status hidden behind simple clothes. She listened to stories told in smoky cantinas, stories of strangers who appeared in desperate moments. One night, in a dim tavern on the edge of a mining outpost, she heard a group of traders speaking in hushed tones. "A ship like no other," one said, "came out of nowhere when the raiders struck us last cycle. The pilot was mad, I tell you. He drove straight into their fire like he didn't care for his life. Saved us all, then vanished," another nodded. "Human," they said. "Always human. Nobody else flies like that." Eliara's heart raced. She leaned closer, asking carefully, "Do you know where he went?" The traders shrugged. "No one ever knows. He comes, he saves, he leaves. Some call him a fool, others a hero. To me, he's a ghost." The word struck her deeply. A ghost. That was how he seemed to her as well, appearing from the dark only to vanish into it again. She returned to her ship, but instead of despair, she felt renewed hope. Each story, each whisper told her she was on the right path. Somewhere out there, this human was still fighting, still saving lives even if no one knew his name. Yet danger grew alongside her search. On one journey, her ship was tracked by agents of the Kiran raiders. They had not forgotten the humiliation of being defeated by a lone human, and they suspected Eliara might know more than she claimed. A shadow followed her through the outer rim, waiting for the right chance to strike. One evening, as her cruiser passed silently near an uncharted system, alarms rang again. Raider ships fell out of warp, their weapons already charging. Eliara's guards rushed to their stations. Her heart sank. This was how it had all begun months ago. But even as fear rose, a strange hope burned inside her. Her eyes scanned the dark outside, searching for a familiar shape, a battered old vessel that had once turned the tide. Part of her whispered, "He will come." But the stars remained empty. This time there was no mysterious savior rushing to their aid. The Dominion soldiers fought bravely, but the raiders pressed hard. Explosions shook the halls of Eliara's ship. She gripped the edge of the command seat, her mind racing. She realized then that she could not rely on chance, not always. If she wished to understand the human who saved her, she would need to learn to fight with the same resolve he had shown. As the battle raged, Eliara gave orders no one expected from a princess. She commanded maneuvers that risked their ship but created openings. She ordered strikes at weak points, not according to manuals, but by instinct. It was reckless, dangerous, yet strangely effective. For the first time, her crew looked at her not only as a leader by birth, but as a commander by will. When at last the raiders broke off, unwilling to suffer more losses, Eliara stood tall, though her heart was racing. The crew cheered for their survival, but she remained silent. She understood now why the human had acted as he did. Sometimes survival required more than logic. It required the courage to act without fear of consequence. As the stars returned to calm, Eliara whispered to herself, "I will find you. Not just to thank you, but to understand why you are different." And somewhere, far across the galaxy, the human ghost flew his ship into another storm, unaware that the princess he had once saved was chasing his shadow with a determination that would change both their fates. The galaxy had grown restless. Rumors of growing pirate fleets spread like storms through the trade lanes. The Kirin raiders, angered by their past defeat, had joined with other outlaw clans to strike harder than ever before. Convoys were burned, colonies stripped of resources, and fear spread across systems once thought safe. Princess Eliara, now traveling on a diplomatic mission to unite allies, could not escape the whispers. Many leaders doubted the Dominion's strength. Some even spoke of surrendering tribute to the raiders just to survive. Eliara listened to their fears, but deep inside she remembered the human who had once faced such odds alone. If one man in a broken ship could stand against them, then great empires had no excuse to bow. Her convoy entered the Nabarros sector, a region known for heavy trade and dangerous ambushes. The plan was to meet with the governors of nearby colonies, but even as her cruiser moved into orbit, warning signals began to flash. From the dark edges of the system, a vast fleet emerged, pirate ships painted in the colors of many clans flying together under a single banner. Their numbers dwarfed Eliara's escort. The raiders had prepared this trap carefully, waiting for the moment when a royal ship carried not soldiers but diplomats. The first blast struck like thunder. Shields trembled, lights dimmed, and crew members scrambled to stations. Eliara felt her heart tighten, the memory of her first ambush crashing back. Once again, she was surrounded by fire and fear, but this time was worse. The enemy fleet was massive, a swarm that blotted out the stars. Even with brave effort, her escorts could not hold. The royal cruiser shuddered under the storm. Panic filled the command hall. Officers shouted, alarms wailed, and the future of the Dominion seemed seconds from ruin. And then, a voice cut through the noise. "Unknown ship inbound." Every head turned to the viewing screens. Out of the darkness, a single vessel raced forward. Small, weathered, patched with scars of 100 battles. It was the same one Eliara remembered. The same ship that had appeared in her darkest hour months before. Her breath caught in her throat. He had come again. The small craft moved like lightning, darting into the heart of the raider fleet without hesitation. It fired in sharp bursts, striking weak points, confusing formations. Larger ships tried to crush it, but the human pilot twisted and rolled in ways no machine could predict. Eliara leaned forward, her eyes wide. "It's him." Her crew watched in disbelief as the lone vessel turned the tide. Not by sheer strength, but by forcing the pirates into chaos. He tricked them into firing at each other, lured them into chasing him into crossfire, used every scrap of skill and instinct to stretch their confusion into defeat. For long minutes, the stars blazed with battle. And though Eliara's ship trembled, hope returned to her heart. She could see the difference again. The same reckless courage, the same refusal to fall. "Should we send reinforcements?" one officer asked. Eliara shook her head slowly. "No, watch him. Learn from him." Her voice carried across the command hall and silence fell. The crew turned their eyes to the display, studying the movements of the ghost pilot. It was madness, yet it was brilliance. At last, after losses piled too high, the pirate fleet broke apart. Their ships scattered in panic, engines burning as they fled into the black. The lone human vessel slowed, drifting near the royal cruiser as if to make sure they were safe. This time, Eliara was ready. "Lock on his signal," she ordered. "Do not lose him." Her technicians scrambled to obey, tracing every pulse of his engine, every flicker of his ship's trail. The human vessel lingered for only a moment. Then, true to its nature, it turned away, preparing to vanish once more. But before it could, Eliara stepped forward and sent a message through the comms. "Wait," she whispered, though her voice carried strong. For a moment, silence filled the air. Then through the static came the same rough voice she remembered. "You're alive. That's enough." The word struck her heart like a memory reborn. But this time Ilyara did not let him leave. "No," she said firmly. "It is not enough. I must know your name." There was a pause. The ship did not change course, but the silence seemed heavier. Finally the voice answered, short and quiet. "Names don't matter." "Then they do to me," Ilyara replied. Her eyes burned with determination. "You saved me twice. You saved all of us. I will not let a ghost carry this burden alone." Her crew exchanged uncertain glances, but Ilyara's gaze never left the fading light of his ship. For a moment she feared he would vanish again. But then, almost reluctantly, the vessel slowed. A new signal blinked on her display. A trace, a line leading back to the edges of human space. He had left her a trail. Not a name, not a promise, but enough to follow. Ilyara felt her chest rise with a breath she hadn't known she was holding. She turned to her crew and spoke with quiet strength. "We will follow. We will find him." And for the first time, the ghost had left her more than hope. He had left her a path. The humans' trail led Ilyara and her convoy far from the bright centers of the galaxy. They crossed empty sectors where stars burned lonely and planets lay barren. The signal he had left behind was faint, almost like a whisper, but Ilyara refused to give up. For days the crew worked to hold the trace, following its flicker through the dark. Many of her officers questioned the wisdom of chasing a stranger. Some even worried it was a trap, but Ilyara's mind was steady. She knew what she had seen, and she believed in the courage behind that battered ship. At last, the trail ended at the edge of human space. The stars here glowed softer, and the systems were poor, filled with mining colonies and half-forgotten stations. Ilyara ordered her ship to move slowly, hiding its royal colors. If she appeared as a princess of the Dominion, she feared the human might run again. Her search took her to a dusty colony world, a place where the air smelled of iron and the sky carried a dull red hue. The settlement was small, built of steel and stone, its people worn by years of hard labor. Here survival was not given by wealth or fleets. It was earned each day by sweat and will. Ilyara left her ship in plain clothes, walking among the miners and traders. Their eyes followed her curiously, but no one guessed her true identity. She asked careful questions, listening more than she spoke. At first, no one gave her answers. Then an old mechanic finally told her of a man who fit the shadow she chased. "Scarred face, quiet voice," the mechanic said. "Flies a ship that should have been scrapped years ago. Some say he's cursed. Others say he's the only reason raiders fear to strike this sector. Calls himself Jace Corin. Doesn't stay long anywhere." The name struck Ilyara like a spark in the dark. At last, the ghost had form. That evening, she followed the directions the mechanic gave. Outside the settlement near the broken cliffs, she found a hangar carved into stone. Inside, half hidden under tarps and tools, stood the ship she knew, the same battered vessel that had twice turned death into hope. And near it, working silently on a damaged engine, stood a man. His hair was dark, streaked with gray, though he was not old. His shoulders were broad but tired. A scar ran across his cheek, the mark of battles long past. He did not wear medals or symbols. He looked like a man who had lost much and carried the weight quietly. Ilyara stepped closer. Her heart beat fast, but her voice was calm. "You are Jace Corin." The man turned, surprised. His eyes were sharp but weary, like someone who had seen too much and trusted too little. He studied her without speaking. At last he said in a low voice, "You shouldn't be here." "You saved me," Ilyara replied. "Twice I could not let you vanish again." Jace looked away, tightening a bolt on the engine. "I saved a lot of people. Doesn't matter. I don't want thanks. I don't want attention. But you matter to me," Ilyara said softly. The words made him pause. His hands stilled, his shoulders tense. For a long moment, silence filled the hangar, broken only by the hum of machinery. Finally, he sighed. "Princess Ilyara, I knew you'd find me sooner or later." She blinked. "You knew?" "I recognized your ship the first time," Jace admitted. "Didn't plan to speak, but circumstances forced me." "You're alive, that's enough." He repeated the same words she had heard before. Yet standing before him now, she understood there was more behind them. Not coldness, but pain. Not distance, but a wall built from loss. "Why do you fight for strangers?" she asked gently. His gaze hardened, though his voice remained calm. "Because raiders took everything from me once. Family, friends, a colony that trusted me. I couldn't save them. I swore I wouldn't let it happen again. If I see someone in danger, I don't ask who they are. I just act. Iliara felt a deep respect grow in her heart. This was the truth of humanity she had glimpsed before. Courage born not from duty but from choice. He had no empire behind him, no council giving orders. He fought because it was right, even if no one remembered his name. You are no ghost, she said firmly. You are more than the legends. You are the reason I still breathe. Jace shook his head. I'm just a man trying to balance a scale that never evens. Don't turn me into something I'm not. But Iliara stepped closer, her voice strong. Then let me carry part of that weight. My people must see what I have seen. They must hear your truth. His eyes met hers, filled with conflict. He had lived in shadows for so long, avoiding praise, avoiding power. Yet something in Iliara's voice carried a strength he could not easily refuse. For the first time, Jace did not turn away. And in that moment, under the glow of the old hangar lights, the ghost of the stars became real. The journey back to the Dominion capital was quiet at first. Jace had agreed to come, but his silence filled every corner of the royal cruiser. He sat away from the council guards, away from the grand designs carved into the walls of the ship. He looked like he belonged more to the empty stars than to the shining halls of a palace. Iliara watched him closely. She had brought him here, but she knew the task ahead would not be easy. The Dominion Council was not kind to outsiders. They judged by bloodlines, power, and ancient rules. To them, a lone human with a scarred face and a rusting ship would seem like nothing. Yet Iliara believed that his voice could shake their pride if only they listened. When they arrived at the capital world, the difference between him and her people was plain. The landing docks glittered with silver towers, banners, and soldiers in polished armor. The crowd gathered quickly when word spread that the princess had returned with a stranger. Whispers rose like a storm. Who was he? Why had she brought him? Some looked with curiosity, others with suspicion. Jace walked calmly beside Iliara, neither proud nor ashamed. His eyes scanned everything, not with awe but with the cautious gaze of someone who had walked through too many dangers. He did not bow to the nobles who sneered at him. He did not smile when others tried to provoke him. He carried himself with the quiet strength of a man who needed no approval. Inside the great council chamber, the rulers of the Dominion sat in their high seats, draped in jewels and robes. Their voices echoed as they questioned Iliara, demanding answers. Why had she brought this human? What gave him the right to step into their hall? Iliara stood tall, her voice firm. Because he saved me. Twice. Because without him, the heir of this throne would be dust among the stars. And because you, who call yourselves protectors of our people, must hear the truth of one who stands with no throne, no army, and yet does more for others than any of you. The chamber erupted in argument. Some laughed. Others shouted that it was an insult. But the council leader, an elder with sharp eyes, silenced them. He turned to Jace. You have been brought here. Speak then. What claim do you make? Jace's face remained calm. He shook his head slightly. I make no claim. The word startled the hall. 1,000 whispers filled the air. Iliara's heart clenched, afraid that he would close himself again. But then Jace raised his voice, strong and steady. I don't stand here to beg for honor or reward. I don't need your titles. What I want is simple, that you remember the people who fight and bleed while you argue in these halls. Out there, beyond your walls, raiders tear colonies apart. Families starve. Ships burn, and you debate while the stars fall silent one by one. The council shifted uncomfortably, his words cut sharper than any blade. I lost everything once, Jace continued. I watched a colony die because no one came. Not from the Dominion, not from the Terran fleets, not from anyone. I swore that if I could stop such a thing from happening again, I would. That is why I fight, not for me, not for power, but for those who have no one. The hall grew still. Some nobles lowered our eyes. Others clenched their fists, angry that an outsider dared to speak so boldly. But Iliara saw the truth. His voice was breaking through walls that had stood for centuries. One counselor rose in anger. You accuse us of failure. Yet what are you but one man with a broken ship? What power do you truly have? Jace met his gaze without fear. I have only this: when I see danger, I act. I do not wait for orders. I do not count the cost. I move because hesitation kills. One man cannot save the galaxy, but one man can save a life, and sometimes that is enough. Iliara felt her chest tighten with pride. He had spoken the very heart of what she believed. The chamber fell silent. No one laughed now. No one whispered. They had expected a beggar or a fool seeking fame. Instead, they had heard the voice of a man who had nothing yet carried more strength than empires. Iliara stepped forward. You asked what claim he makes. I tell you this, he claims nothing. Yet I stand alive before you only because of him, and if you cannot see the value in such a man, then perhaps it is not he who is small, but this council itself. The elder council leader studied Jace for a long time. His face showed no clear thought, but his eyes carried respect. Finally he spoke. Leave us. We will consider what has been said. Iliara led Jace from the hall. Outside, she turned to him. You spoke with more courage than I could have hoped. He shook his head. I only spoke the truth. But truth is what they fear most, Iliara replied softly. For the first time since she met him, she saw a faint smile touch his lips. Not joy, not triumph, but the quiet release of a man who had carried a heavy burden and finally set it down. If only for a moment, and deep in her heart, she knew the council had heard something they would never forget. The council chamber was quiet when Iliara returned. The elders sat in thoughtful silence, their faces shadowed with contemplation. Jace followed her, his presence calm and steady. No one spoke immediately. The weight of his words from the previous meeting still lingered like a ghost in the grand hall. Finally, Iliara stepped forward, her gaze sweeping over the council. She felt a strength she had never known before. Not from birthright, not from titles, but from conviction. She spoke, her voice clear and firm. You have heard what he has said. You have heard the truth of courage, of selflessness, and of strength that is not measured by armies or fleets. What you call recklessness, I call the heart of humanity. Whispers rose among the counselors, but Iliara did not falter. She raised her hand, signaling them to silence. This man saved my life. He saved the lives of countless others, and he did so without expectation of reward, without asking for fame, without concern for power. That is something no law, no fleet, no empire can teach. It is chosen and it is rare. That is why I stand before you now. Not to demand accolades, but to demand understanding. Jace remained still beside her, watching. He did not speak, for his words had already shaken the council. His presence alone, silent and unassuming, made it impossible for them to dismiss what had happened. One of the elders, a woman with eyes like polished silver, finally rose. Her voice was quiet but strong. Princess Iliara, your words carry weight. But what proof do we have beyond your testimony? Why should we, guardians of the Dominion, trust a human over our own judgment? Iliara's gaze did not waver. Because I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. And if you cannot believe my word, then perhaps you are not ready to lead when the next threat comes. Humanity's strength is not in weapons or numbers, it is in choice. It is in courage. It is in the willingness to act when all else fails. The chamber fell into heavy silence. For the first time, the council truly listened. Jace's quiet determination filled the room more than any speech could. His actions had already proven their value, and now the words he had spoken and the presence he carried demanded acknowledgement. The elder with silver eyes studied him, then slowly lowered her gaze. Perhaps, she said softly, there is more to humanity than we have ever understood. Perhaps we have been blind. Iliara felt a small victory bloom in her chest. She stepped closer to Jace and without fear spoke again, her voice strong and unwavering. He does not seek praise. He does not seek power, but he teaches us what it means to be brave, to act for others when it is not convenient, when it is dangerous. That is a lesson I hope we all remember. For a long moment the council remained silent. Then one by one they began to nod, some with hesitation, some with growing respect. Words were spoken, careful and deliberate, but all carried a new understanding. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not reckless. Humanity was different. And perhaps that difference was exactly what the galaxy needed. Jace's face remained calm, but Iliara could see a flicker of something she had not expected. Acceptance. He did not seek it, but it was given nonetheless. For the first time, the ghost who had flown unseen through the stars was recognized not as a stranger, but as a symbol of courage. Iliara turned to him and whispered, "You changed more than my life. You changed the hearts of an empire." He looked at her, silent for a moment, then nodded slightly. "I only did what I could. That's all anyone can do. But sometimes," Iliara said softly, What one person can do is enough to change everything. The council chamber, once filled with doubt and doubt alone, now held a quiet reverence. The elders understood that courage, selflessness, and choice mattered as much as armies and strategy. And in that moment, humanity was no longer a distant, unknown race. Humanity had a voice, a presence, and a courage that could not be ignored. As Ilyara left the chamber, Jace walked beside her. She knew their journey together was far from over. There would be more battles, more challenges, and more unknown threats. But she also knew something had shifted, something profound. Humanity, through one quiet, determined man, had spoken to the galaxy in a way no one could silence. The stars stretched endlessly outside the palace windows, and Ilyara smiled. Somewhere in that vast, shining universe, she knew that courage could still find its way, even from a single human heart, and she would carry that lesson with her forever. The echo of her words and the presence of Jace beside her left the room, and the galaxy, silent. Not in fear, but in awe. In that silence was understanding, and in that understanding was hope. The human who had once been a ghost had finally been seen, and the universe would never forget what she said.